Hi, everyone. This is Scald with Griffin Eye News, and we are here with some more heraldic myth busting. As always, we have Dame Arwyn, who is going to be answering all the questions.
I'm going to try. We're going to try.
Okay, so first off, the cutoff period for heralds, that's 1485, correct?
So interesting about that. The 1485 comes from the concept that most medieval, Norse or Norman heraldry would be considered to end around 1485. Okay, so most heraldry rules end at 1485. The SCA is smart. So we define the end of period as 1650. So although the SCA defines anything prior to 1600 to be okay, we decided that between 1600 and 1650, that there could have been people who died or got married after 1600 that could have lived or were born prior to 1600. So we let a gray period happen between 1600 and 1650 with one proviso. The proviso is that as long as something specifically says that prior to 1625, something theoretic, that name didn't exist in period. So that doesn't happen very often. So our timeline is really anything 1600 and prior, with an extension into 1650. So I'm not sure where 1485 comes from, other than most of our rules with heraldry are around that time period. But we have later period heraldry that we can use too. So we've expanded it. For the most part, we've always been, 1600 and prior. Years ago, it used to be 600 to 1600. But because the SCA's definition of what we consider to be acceptable is anything that is pre-17th century. So that's what we define our rules as well. So come talk to us. My husband actually passed a 1600 completely registerable name, completely, only in 1600. So if he can do it, you can too.
Well, that's always good to know. So let's talk about my device here. Or a device. So can I have a cloak on my device if I'm not a peer, or do I have to be a peer to put a cloak on my device?
Well, do you mean the item as a cloak, or do you mean can I wear a cloak as a peer? Because there are two different things. So a cloak is an item of clothing, and it's considered to be an acceptable heraldic charge. You got to be careful because there's lots of kingdoms that have been registering them lately, particularly for the Order of the Defense, and some not necessarily for the Order of the Defense, but people who do rapier and things like that. Avacal tried to do something with a cloak as well. So the item itself is considered to be okay. Whether or not you can get away with what's already been registered already, that's one thing. However, here's the thing is that I was always in the understanding, and misinformation as well, that you couldn't wear a cloak unless you were like cloak with your device on it until you were a peer. Now, that's actually not true either. It's just that some orders in some kingdoms give you a mantle or give you something that has your device on it when you become a peer. But that doesn't mean that if you want to display and proudly display your device on the back of a cloak, go for it. It's just that in some places, that's what happens when you become a peer. So when I became a pelican, some didn't know that the mantle or a mantle, a cloak with just with your heraldry on it was a thing from Eldamir that we did a lot, and the mid realm did a lot. So I ended up getting a mantle with my heraldry on it, beautifully embroidered. But we don't have any rules out here for that. So if you want to put it on your device, go for it. If you want a cloak on your device, go for it. Either one's okay.
Okay, so well, maybe I will change up my device a little bit there.
I kind of like your device the way it is. I
uh,
like your raven, and I like your
the
other
Raven's been
stats.
around for a while.
Yeah, and the rose. So
We'll get to that later. So charges that have been previously registered in society, they're always okay to use, correct?
well, yes and no. So sometimes what we find is that we've had charges. So charges are things we put on heraldry. Sometimes we said historically that they were okay. What we've been finding as a result of trying to meet our DEI, so our diversity, equity, and inclusion, that some of the things weren't necessarily as sensitive to certain cultural groups. So a perfect example is, we talk about the swastika as being an unacceptable charge. That's been banned since I've been in the FCA, since 1991 and beyond. I think it goes back to like 1975. But there's been a lot of our hate groups that have been taking a lot of our period heraldry charges and associating them with their group, with their association. And, we're talking about the white supremacists, and we're talking about some of the hate groups. And so some of the charges that historically could have been passed are now considered to be associated with hate groups and aren't considered to be acceptable anymore. It's unfortunate because a lot of them are really, really cool heraldry. But when the common person goes, but that's like the swastika, that's like that hate group thing, then we start to have to step back and look and say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do that anymore. So most of the time, most heraldry that was used before, we can use. It's just a question of whether or not, with today's sensitivity and today's desire to try to be equitable and acceptable to most people, we have to be considered that unfortunately some of those groups have taken some kind of really cool heraldry that we historically were able to use. So it's a little far in between, but just understand that we're trying to realize that we're trying to keep the SCA in a very positive front when it comes to that. So, so if someone says, I'm sorry, but that device is no longer allowed because it's considered to be offensive, don't take it personally from that perspective. Just understand that we're trying to keep that positivity about keeping the SCA, in a really cool light, right?
Okay, well that's good to know. So thank you very much for your time there, Dame Arwyn, and we'll see you next Monday for some more cool heraldry.
That sounds awesome. Next Monday.